There's a plant growing right now in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in the same fields where Amish families have farmed for 3 centuries. It will fuel your diesel truck, your gasoline car, your generator, your tractor, your chainsaw, every combustion engine you own, without a single modification, without a trip to a mechanic, without ever stopping at a gas station again. 1 plant, 2 fuels, 0 waste. And in 2010, a university laboratory proved something with a single number that the oil industry has spent 80 years making sure you would never hear. The number is 97. I'll tell you what that number means. But first, I need to tell you about a man who boarded a ship in Belgium in September 1913 and was never seen alive again. Because what happened to him is the reason you're paying $4 a gallon today and the reason the Amish never needed to. His name was Rudolf Diesel, and the engine he built was never supposed to run on petroleum at all. Stay with me, because the story of this plant starts with his body floating in the North Sea, and it ends with 4 men whose names you already know destroying the only fuel network farmers had ever built for themselves. Before I name those 4 men, and I will name them, with their exact relationships to each other and to the law that killed this plant, I need you to understand what this plant actually does, because the chemistry is so simple it almost sounds like a lie. Hemp seeds are roughly 30% oil by weight. You press them the same way you'd press olives. The oil comes out amber, clean, thick. To turn that oil into diesel fuel, you mix it with methanol and a small amount of lye. The same lye in your grandmother's soap. You don't need a lab. You don't need a degree. You need a used electric water heater, about $300 in fittings, and a free afternoon. The mixture reacts. It separates into 2 layers. The top layer is diesel fuel. The bottom layer is glycerin. You can make soap from it. Wash the top layer with water. Let it dry. That's it. That's the entire process. But here's what nobody tells you about where that process came from. Rudolf Diesel didn't design his engine to run on petroleum. He filed his patent in 1892 and called it a compression ignition engine. The fuel he described was plant oil. In 1900, the French government asked him to run his engine at the Paris World's Exposition on peanut oil from their African colonies. He did. The engine ran so quietly that the crowd watching thought it wasn't running at all. Diesel stood in front of that engine and told the world that vegetable oils would one day be as important as petroleum. He believed that any farmer should be able to grow fuel in his own field. 13 years later, he boarded a postal steamer in Antwerp, Belgium, heading to England to meet with the British Royal Navy about installing his engines in their submarines. He ate dinner on the ship. He retired to his cabin at 10 in the evening and asked to be woken at 6:15 the next morning. When the steward knocked, the cabin was empty. The bed had not been slept in. His nightshirt was laid out. His pocket watch was set where he could see it from the pillow. His coat and hat were found folded beneath the stern railing. 10 days later, a Dutch fishing crew found a body in the North Sea, too decomposed to identify. The personal effects in its pockets were later confirmed by his son to be his father's. The newspapers ran 2 kinds of headlines. Some said suicide. Others said something darker. Inventor thrown into the sea to stop the sale of patents to the British government. Murdered by agents of the big oil trusts. His wife opened a bag he had handed her before departure. Inside was the equivalent of $50,000 in cash and financial statements showing their accounts were nearly empty. In his diary, he had drawn a cross on the date September 29th, 1913. We may never know what happened on that ship. But we know this. The man who invented the most efficient engine in history, who publicly believed that plant oil would replace petroleum, vanished 3 days before he was set to give the British Navy an engine that ran on crops instead of crude oil. And after he was gone, nobody pushed to keep plant oil as the standard fuel. The petroleum companies adjusted the fuel systems, made diesel from crude oil the default. Within a decade, every diesel engine in the world was burning petroleum. The engine that was built to free farmers became the machine that chained them to an oil company for the next 100 years. Now here's where it gets stranger. Because 25 years after diesel disappeared, the most famous manufacturer in America was trying to undo exactly what petroleum had done. And in February 1938, a magazine published what should have been the most important agricultural story of the century. I'll show you that magazine. But I need to tell you what happened in 1937 first, the single year that destroyed 80 years of American farming knowledge in a matter of weeks. Henry Ford understood the diesel engine's original purpose better than almost anyone alive in the 1930s. His Model T was designed in 1908 to run on gasoline, ethanol, or any combination of both. By 1925, he was telling the New York Times that the fuel of the future would come from fruit, from weeds, from sawdust, from any vegetable matter that could be fermented. He put his money where his mouth was. At his Iron Mountain facility in Michigan, he ran a biomass conversion plant that processed hemp and other crops into methanol, charcoal fuel, tar, pitch, and ethyl acetate, all the foundational materials for modern industry, grown in a single season and replaced the next. In August 1941, Ford unveiled a car with body panels made from hemp, soy, wheat straw, and flax, lighter than fiberglass. He swung an axe into the trunk on camera. The axe bounced back. The panel didn't dent. The car was designed to run on hemp ethanol. He was 77 years old, swinging an axe at a vehicle grown from the soil and powered by it. But by the time he built that car, it was already 4 years too late. In 1937, a law called the Marijuana Tax Act was signed into federal law. Notice the spelling, marijuana with an H. That was deliberate. The word was Mexican slang. Harry Anslinger, the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, used it specifically because most Americans had never heard it. If he had called the plant cannabis, every doctor in the country would have recognized a medicine. If he had called it hemp, every farmer would have recognized a crop. By calling it marijuana, he severed the connection between a useful plant and the law designed to kill it. Before taking the narcotics job, Anslinger had publicly stated there was no greater absurd fallacy than the idea that cannabis caused violence. He didn't believe it was a problem, but Prohibition ended in 1933 and his department was about to disappear. He needed an enemy. He found 3 men who needed that enemy for entirely different reasons. William Randolph Hearst owned newspapers, timberland, and paper mills across the country. Hemp produced paper faster and cheaper than wood pulp, a direct threat to everything he'd built. The DuPont family had just patented nylon and a new chemical process for making paper from wood. Hemp fiber competed with nylon directly. Hemp paper competed with their wood pulp process. Andrew Mellon, Secretary of the Treasury and the wealthiest man in America, had invested heavily in DuPont. He was also Harry Anslinger's father-in-law. He had personally appointed Anslinger to the narcotics position. And behind all of them, Standard Oil, the Rockefeller empire. Hemp oil as fuel threatened the foundation of everything they sold. These men didn't need to meet in a dark room. Hearst's papers ran front-page stories connecting marijuana to violence and racial fear. Anslinger testified before Congress with cases that had no medical evidence behind them. The American Medical Association sent a doctor to oppose the act. He told Congress the claims weren't supported by science. His testimony was dismissed. The act passed on August 2, 1937. In February 1938, 6 months after that law went into effect, Popular Mechanics published an article with the headline, New Billion-Dollar Crop. The article was about hemp. It described a new machine that could process hemp stalks cheaply and at industrial scale. It said hemp could produce more than 5,000 products and called it the standard fiber of the world. It predicted thousands of new jobs and an entirely new agricultural economy. The editors didn't know the law had already passed. It was that quiet, that buried. By the time their article hit newsstands, it was already illegal to grow the crop they were celebrating. The future was announced at its own funeral, and nobody in the room knew it was a funeral. But here's the detail that almost no one knows. Because the law wasn't the only weapon used in 1937, that same year, a fuel blend called Agrol was selling at 2,000 service stations across the American Midwest. Indiana to South Dakota, 2 blends, 5% alcohol and up to 17% alcohol, made from plant-based ethanol at a facility in Atchison, Kansas. Backed by the same farm chemistry movement Ford had championed. The brochure read, "Try a tankful, you'll be thankful." Customers came back. The fuel worked. Then the managers started reporting what they couldn't ignore: market manipulation, lobbying against every tax incentive that could have leveled the price gap. The American Petroleum Institute publicly attacked ethanol as inferior fuel. Between 1933 and 1939, petroleum interests killed 19 federal bills and 31 state bills aimed at supporting alcohol fuel blending. Their own spokesman mocked supporters as dream chemists and armchair farmers. By 1939, the Atchison plant closed its doors. 2,000 stations vanished from the map. The only plant fuel network in America, built by farmers, for farmers, erased in the same 24-month window that the Marijuana Tax Act killed hemp. Same war, different weapons, same winners. Now I'll give you the number I planted at the start. In 2010, Professor Richard Parnas and his team at the University of Connecticut took virgin hemp seed oil and ran it through standard transesterification in their biofuels laboratory. They tested the output against every American and European biodiesel quality standard. 97% of the hemp oil converted to diesel fuel. Not 90, not 93. 97%. It passed every test. It met every standard, and it showed something nobody expected. Superior cold weather performance. Hemp biodiesel outperformed every other biodiesel on the market at low temperatures. Parnas told reporters that a farmer growing hemp might be able to produce enough fuel from seeds alone to power their entire farm. One crop, one press, one reactor, total energy independence. That number, 97%, is why 4 men with newspapers and Congress and a narcotics bureau worked so hard to make sure you never heard of this plant. Because a farm that makes its own fuel doesn't need Standard Oil. A paper mill that processes hemp doesn't need Hearst's timber. A textile company that spins hemp fiber doesn't need DuPont's nylon. The 97% was always there. The Amish always knew it. You were just never given the number. If you're watching this without a farm, without a tractor, without a single acre to your name, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. If you own any diesel engine, a truck, a generator, a water pump, you can run it on hemp biodiesel right now. Buy cold-pressed hemp seed oil in bulk. Mix it with methanol and lye in a reactor you build from a used electric water heater for under $300. Plans are free online. The chemistry is the same chemistry you'd be running in your shed. For gasoline engines, the federal government issues a free fuel alcohol permit through the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. You apply, you get approved. You can legally distill ethanol for motor fuel on your own property. You're not making drinking alcohol, you're making fuel. You have a federal permit on the wall. What you produce can be blended at 10 to 15% with standard gasoline and run in any engine without a single modification. That's already what E10 at the pump is. You'd just be making your own supply instead of buying someone else's. Brazil figured this out in the 1970s. Brazilian cars ran on blends up to 24% ethanol. Millions of vehicles. Decades of use. No engine failures. The technology isn't experimental. It's been proven for 50 years in another country. The only thing missing in America was the legal right to grow the crop. The 2018 Farm Bill gave that right back. Almost nobody noticed. 1 acre of hemp gives you roughly 20 gallons of biodiesel from the seeds, plus thousands of pounds of stalk that ferments into ethanol for your gasoline engines. One harvest, both fuel types. Every engine covered. The Amish in Lancaster County didn't read the Yukon study. They didn't attend Ford's conferences. They didn't need the 2018 Farm Bill to tell them what a plant their families had grown since 1710 could do. They filed the knowledge away in 1937 the way they file everything. Quietly, practically, passed from grandfather to grandson without anyone writing it down. They were patient. They always are. They have outlasted every government program, every market force, every trend that told them to change. And when the law finally got out of their way, they were ready before anyone else in the country. If you could grow 1 acre of hemp this season, drop in the comments what you'd fuel first. Your truck, your tractor, your generator. I read every one, and your answers determine what comes next on this channel. Subscribe, because we are going to keep pulling on these threads. Knowledge is power, and so much has been lost.